So I am Jessica Altman, and I am interviewing our principal, Allison Jordan. Okay. I don't know if you had a chance to look over some of the questions. Yep. Yep, that's what we're going to look at. We're going to look at campus improvement plan, or discuss campus improvement plan, how kind of PLC aligns with all of that, T-TESS, and then kind of how all of that aligns with my PASL test. Okay. So thinking about the campus improvement plan that you created for this year and all the goals, what data went into the creation of that plan this year?
So, almost very data rich. So we look at everything. So we start all the way in June after our teachers are out. Our admin team, we're part of some of that. Since we look at all of our end of the year data, we look at trends that we saw over the course of the year. And then of course, as soon as we get our star scores back, that factors in as well. So it's just a lot of data to sift through. So we look at, any of our campus assessments that we have, our district-wide assessments. We look at STAR. We use our STAR REN. We look at attendance data. We look at growth data. Those matrix, the quadrants. We've looked at our data by demographics. And really when we're looking, it's more just, we're just exploring. We're not looking for any patterns yet. We're just exploring and seeing, based on our campus improvement plan from last year, have we targeted, do we make any progress on the subgroups that we identified? So last year was our EVs. What did their growth look like? And then what other trends are we starting to see that we know we need to address beyond just the EVs? When we're developing the CIP, one of the big pieces of guidance that they give us is you really shouldn't have the same goal every single year. Now, our challenge with our increasing population of EVs isn't going away, but we have already identified that as a goal and put structures in place in order to support them. And so if we were doing that work on the CIP all of last year, that goal really shouldn't have to continue. The structures that we put in place are, but it shouldn't be a goal again. That makes sense.
So how do your current goals relate to your data? So what did you find out?
A lot. So one of the things, the new principle that I'm learning is that you really can tailor your data to fit any argument you want for your goal. So I try to remove what I think need to be the goals, and just totally look at it. What are the things that are outliers? So for one, so let me back up to last year. The reason we identified EVs is because we had a huge jump. We went from, something like 7% of our population is EVs all the way up to 20. Like you can't ignore that increase. So this year, what stood out to me the most was the performance of our special education population. So if you look at all of our sub-pops, the lowest is about 70% proficiency, except for SPED. When you look at SPED, it jumps all the way down to like 24, 33% proficiency. So there is a huge gap in that subpopulation versus all the others. And so I just felt like while the population of special education students is fairly low, you can't ignore that subpopulation is not meeting proficiency. And when our campus mission and vision is that we're promising great learning for all, we really haven't included our SPED population in that if we're seeing only 24% proficiency. So that really stuck out to me. And then, I've had a big focus on 5th grade, and that has come about. It's been years in the making, the turnover in staff, the lack of kind of cohesion and teamwork that we see with that group of teachers. And so I knew that I wanted that to be a focus, but if you're looking strictly at, let's just say math and reading data, 5th grade doesn't stand out that much more than 4th grade stands out. In fact, 4th grade had a greater discrepancy in math data than 5th grade. But if we look at the whole picture, ELA, math, science together, coupled with what we know about the team, I was able to pull data to support why we're focusing on 5th grade. And really what we did, instead of looking at our approaches, which is usually the first thing that we looked at, we looked at meets and masters for 5th grade, and in relation to our comparison group. So as a district and as a campus, fifth grade's sitting pretty well. It's not like it wasn't screaming at me like our SPED numbers were.
Right.
But when I'm looking at our campus comparison, in order for our campus, for our fifth graders, our fifth grade teachers to get into that first quartile, there was the biggest discrepancy between the first quartile and where we're scoring in the second and third quartile than there was in fourth and third grade. So that's how I kind of worked around making my argument that fifth grade needs to be a focus.
Right. No, that makes sense. Absolutely. So I know that I met with you during the summer. Y'all were kind of just looking over some of that. How does your administrative team look at your top 3 or 4 goals? Like, how do you come to that decision? Is it just you, or do you bring in your APs? And
no, it's all of us. So, I mean, it's the 3 of us. So what we did, it starts with me. And the district has this whole process. I'll share it with you. The district has a whole process set up. It's a workbook. And in that workbook are questions that guide you through the whole process. Before the last thing you do is develop the goals.
Oh, nice.
So the questions are things like, historically, what have been strong points of the school? What have been your longitudinally your last 3 years of areas of focus? What do you notice as teams who are really strong? What do you notice in teams who are weaker, and why? Can you pinpoint, is it a teacher issue? Is it a resource issue? Is it knowledge? You know, what's the reason for that gap? So we go through and we answer all these questions, and it starts with me. And then I bring in the other 2 and we sit and I share with them what my responses were and kind of what's shaping what I'm thinking are going to be the overall goals. And then we all just do a data dig together. So once we've answered those questions, and then it leads us to the final screen that says, okay, so what are the top 3, 4, 5 things that you want to focus on? That's when we have to justify it based on the data. And so that's when the 3 of us have our computers open. We're all looking at different things. I may be on Data Suite, somebody's in Schoolzilla, somebody's pulling Star Red. And we just start pulling out all the data we can and putting it into this workbook. And then if that data supports what our initial kind of gut reaction was, then we develop that into a goal. There are some things like 4th grade math was one that stood out to us. It didn't become a campus goal, but we know that it's a focus. We're not going to let that go. We're still going to push 4th grade, but it didn't become, a campus goal. Now, they also tell us you don't have to go through that process the way that we did. I mean, ideally, you answer those questions, allows for lots of reflection, and then you land on your goals. But they also tell us you can work backwards. So if you know, like the SPED data, you can't ignore that. We know that's got to be a goal. Okay. We can start with formulating a goal and work our way back, kind of like what I talked about. So we're shaping that data to justify the goal. But in the district, they're very clear about what that template looks like. And then what's nice, so we start with the three of our admin team members, we work through that. And then I go for a day and we do peer reviews. And so I partner with another elementary school, I partner with another secondary school, and we review each other's CIP, and then we give one another suggestions and feedback. So yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That's great, because sometimes it's hard when you're okay, go present it, and you haven't gotten it. So once you've made your campus improvement plan for the campus, how do you convey that to your staff?
So that's what we're working on right now. So the first step is to bring it back to the campus improvement team, which I've already done. We had our first meeting in September, and I kind of outlined for them that, and at that point, the CIP wasn't due yet. But I was able to say, and the CIT serves as advisory to me. So I was able to say, hey, here's what I'm initially thinking for our goals, and here's why, justifying that with data, and just kind of let them talk about it. So the challenge, so let me give an example. Aside from SPED, another focus for us is aligning K through 2 tier 1 literacy instruction. So one of the challenges that was brought up in CIT is, okay, that's great, but that's a K through 2 focus. So this is a campus improvement team or a campus improvement plan, but you're only targeting K2. Well, not really, because we're streamlining, yes, we're streamlining the tier 1 instruction and K2, but that doesn't mean 3 through 5 is off the hook. That means we need 3 through 5 to look at extending the deepening learning from there. So now my job is to then convey that back to the staff. So I've met with team leads already, and we've had a discussion about, what the major focuses are for this year, and we've let the teams know that are impacted, that we're going to focus on it. I mean, K through 2 is already working on UFly. 5th grade knows that we're working with them. The SLED team knows that they're focused. So now the part that we're the part of the process we're in is making sure that the entire campus knows what those goals are, and how do I as an administrator connect and have an impact to those goals? How do I as a teacher impact that goal, as a specialist? How do all of our stakeholders impact our success towards meeting that goal? So on Monday, we'll have an hour with our teachers. So part of what we're going to do is revisit our mission and vision, and we're going to break apart what that language means. When we say great learning for all, what does great mean? What does learning mean? What does all mean? Make sure we all have a very clear understanding of that mission. And then I'm going to pose a few different data pieces and have people just look through it, not to call any teams out. I may even take the team names or the grade levels off. But when we just clarified our mission and vision, now that we look at some of these data pieces, does that align? Does our data reflect what we say we believe in what we're doing in our instruction? Then from there, I'll introduce, so based on the data we're seeing, here are our 3 goals. And then I'm going to open it up for discussion about, so how do you, within your grade level and your team, impact our success towards those goals?
So with that starting next week, then how frequently do you plan to revisit those goals throughout the year?
So it's constant. So the nice thing about the CIT team is that we meet almost monthly, some bi-monthly, but that is kind of my touch point of when those meetings are coming up. I know, I've got to report back to our team. So for me, that's when I go in, just like we do with our teams. This is our time to progress monitor. That's my time to progress monitor. Where are we at? What's our current reality? And then secondary to that is the 3 of us administrators, our own principal and AP goals connect directly to CIP. So as I'm progress monitoring my personal goals, that then relates to the campus goals. And then the other thing you mentioned at the beginning was team goals. So we knew that coaching is a focus. It's not a campus improvement plan goal, but we know that it's a goal of our specialists. So we figured that if every teacher had a goal related to coaching, that is somehow going to impact instruction, which ultimately is going to impact our goals that we've created. So that was kind of how we were able to loop everybody in there.
Do your goals ever change throughout the year? So like if you have reached a goal or if you need to adjust it or change, how does that happen?
It's kind of the same with teachers. I mean, it's a fluid document. The whole purpose of goal setting is that you're growing and learning. So if we've achieved a goal, just like with a student, we're going to set another goal. That didn't happen at all last year for me, at least. I didn't meet any of my goals until the end of the year. We didn't meet our campus improvement goals. So it's hard, but it's definitely possible. If we meet a goal, we're going to revise and keep going. So last year we had that focus on 180-60, right? Approaches meets masters. And we still have that goal. But in my conversation with Dr. Flores, when I was looking at our campus goals for this year, we believe in that. That's what we aim for. But with some of our teams, that's not a realistic goal. Right. We can't go from 20% mastery up to 60%. That's a really lofty goal. And sometimes what that can result in is frustration of the team and breakdown of communication and feeling like they're not doing enough or that we're pushing them too hard. And if they don't have opportunities to see their success, it can be detrimental to us to push goals like that. So this year is a little more realistic, and I don't know them off the top of my head, but it's a little more realistic in looking at more of our campus comparison group. And rather than what's going to put us all the way at the top, what's going to put us in the first quartile? What's the lowest that we can score? It's still an improvement from where we are, but it will put us in the running with the top 10 schools of our comparison group.
So I know, like the goal that you were just talking about, 180, 60, it's easy to measure that one throughout the year with unit assessments and benchmarks and things like that. But thinking about other goals like EB or special education population, how do you progress monitor that throughout the year to make sure you're at least on the right track or the trends are to where you're needing them to be?
So the SPED goal is a little more tricky because, as we've seen, we have kids who are making minimal or flatlined progress. And what's tricky about that is that then tells us that that's the programming that we have in place is not working, which requires us to go back to art. So with that goal, we really do have to dig down student by student, and we've got to get our students up on that, the data wall and the collaboration. So it is student by student, and it's a little longer process because it's not just us making decisions about how to impact that. I mean, yes, teacher instruction is part of it, but we also have to bring in the gen ed teachers. We have to look at service providers. We have to look at parent perspective. So there's just so much to consider that the process kind of drags out how quickly we can move into action. It doesn't change how quickly we can adjust instruction, but in terms of adjusting a student's goals or moving them from modified grading to modified curriculum, or moving from one dyslexia reading program to another, those decisions can't be made overnight and without a committee. So did I answer that question?
Yeah, I mean, yes, it sounds like it's going to be hard to kind of progress monitor until you can actually start changing the implementations you currently have.
Yeah,
you know what you have
but it's not going to be any different right now than it was last year, because right now we're doing the same things that we were last year. But we put in place for that population the SPED collaborative. So those teachers, part of that is just building the trust between specialized support and SLL, and being creative about ways that we're supporting the students. So just because it's a student in SLL doesn't mean that it's only the SLL paras or teachers supporting that student. How can specialized support be a part of that, and vice versa? So we're breaking some habits that we've had in the past that people are very emotional about and tied to, but we just have to keep coming back to what's working for kids and what's not working for kids. If it's not working and we're not seeing growth, something has to change.
No, absolutely. It's not what's best for students. Why are we doing it? So you kind of talked about how this year you're going to get that staff consensus and buy-in for the campus improvement. But how does that continue throughout the year? So like at the beginning, you're going to do looking at the mission within it, but how does that sustain throughout the year?
So I think the biggest piece is turning that into celebration. So our staff members they're going to progress monitor their own goals just like we do. But if we can start highlighting, being more intentional about celebrating the things that they're doing in order to make progress on that goal, that's when, it's going to re-energize the team to continue digging in. It's going to prompt, other teams to say, oh, hey, what's that team doing that they're getting all this attention for? So K-2 is a perfect example. They're flying. They're soaring with U-Fly. I mean, they're all in. And so we have to be intentional about making sure that we're celebrating them, not just right now, but throughout the year, so that continues. And then being able to pose to them what the data is showing. So like right now, I have Kathy working on the effect size. So for first grade, she's pulling the BOI data versus now that we're 4 or 5 weeks in. What are we already seeing as the impact size for each student in each classroom collectively? So we're hoping that we can continue that moving forward. So we're not forcing the team. I think our team struggles sometimes with analyzing data and knowing how their practices are impacting the larger goal. But if we can do that for them, we'll pull the data and be able to pull that out as a way to celebrate and a way to discuss. Like when we've got 2 first grade classrooms and we've got one where we have 85% of students making expected or exceeding growth. But we've got another classroom using the same program, same grade level, and they're below what we're expecting as growth. It opens it up for that conversation. What's going on? Are we teaching to fidelity? Are we have we gone rogue from the program? Are we not considering the special needs in that classroom with the individual students? Like there has to be a discrepancy. We work really hard to balance our classes. So if they're not all experiencing around the same level of growth, there's probably a reason what's going on.
Yeah, that's true. Well, and you just kind of answered that one with holding them accountable for those goals. And the instruction. So let's move to PLC. I know you're very passionate about PLC. I know some are going to Solution Tree over the next couple days. So how does the PLC process assist you in the progress of the campus improvement plan?
I mean, it's the foundational. I mean, it's the foundation for all of the work that teachers do together. So, I mean, I could talk about this for hours. You can't expect teachers or grade level teams or any team to work collaboratively to meet a goal if they don't have a structure in place for planning, for having conversations, for analyzing, being honest about our reality. And the PLC structure allows for that. So it's the very, I don't know how else to say it, it's just the simplest form of what's going to allow us to work towards our goals. So, I mean, I think the easiest piece with PLC is just what we allow with the data analysis process. So when we're looking at formative assessments or summative assessments, how are we analyzing that data, and how does that then connect to the grade level goal, which we know ultimately connects to the campus-wide goal. Right. So even for us, when our leadership team is sitting in there analyzing grade level goal, that's something we're constantly thinking about. Like, how is their impact when we're looking at first grade ELA? We're looking at their sub-pops. So are we seeing that same discrepancy in SPED that we do for the other sub-pops, or are they starting to make some movement and then being very intentional about calling that out? Hey, y'all, do you see that trend? Do you see that we're making progress on that? Or do we see that we still have the subgroup of students that are struggling? So it just allows for us to have those conversations and call out the realities that the teams need to just face head on. Sometimes, right? And then it also gives us that space that there are times where just having the conversations and having teams run through the structures and procedures that we have in place just isn't enough. But it allows us, because I don't think it's unique to every Tomball campus, but we are very intentional about our entire leadership team being in every PLC we possibly can. It's not that we have certain dedicated days that we go, or we have one admin, or we're not. We all make a point to be there, so that when there are times where we're seeing, hey, we're not making progress, or we need to give you a directive, we have the space to do that. And our teams, they may not always agree, but they're receptive to hearing it because we've been in the work with them throughout the process. I mean, I notice even when you speak, the teams sit and listen. They're not rolling their eyes. They're not walking out saying, "Oh, can you believe myself?" You're in that work with them every single week. So when you do have to speak up about something, they're more willing to reanalyze that and question what, okay, maybe we do need to look at that further, adjust our practice. So I think it's a foundation of conversation and trust with one another, and it just holds us to that high standard that we're not going to let kids fall through the crack, that we're not going to settle for what we've just always done. Somebody made, as at a conference last week, and the keynote made a comment and said, well, I'm gonna share it with staff next week, that tradition gets you beat. And it just resonated with me because we are a campus that generally sits pretty comfortable, and our kids are gonna learn just because of where they come from and the parents that they have and the families that they're raised with. But that is so true to our campus, that tradition is going to get us beat. It may not get us beat in tomball, but it's going to get us beat when our kids go out into the real world, when they move beyond the state of Texas, when they move internationally. And so I'm kind of always keeping my eye on that. Like, are we staying competitive with our cohort of campuses across Texas? Are we staying competitive with other states? And that starts to get more removed from the work that teams are doing. Teams don't see how their work impacts that necessarily, but it's something that we have to consider.
Oh, yeah. Especially if they're not college and career.
Yeah.
Are we really getting them there? So kind of going back to your campus improvement team, how do you determine who, parent-wise, community-wise, staff-wise, how does that team kind of form?
So the district gives us guidelines.
Okay.
We have to have a certain percentage of teachers and a certain percentage of parents, community members, and business owners. Business owners do not need to be from Tomball. They just need to be, somewhere in the area. It doesn't have to be within our zone, but community members and parents do need to be from our school. So it's a challenge. Last year, I ended up with, I think I had 6 teachers. I started with 2 parents and 2 business owners. At the end of the year, I only had 2 business owners, and that was it. And a couple of our teachers fell off, and so it's, until I put this on recording, but there's not, for me, I don't have the committee doesn't have a huge impact on me. They have some great suggestions, but what it ultimately ends up being is me teaching the group about the improvement plan process and about our school, which is great. There's benefit in that because I want people to go out and say, hey, here's the great work that Creepy's doing, or this is why attendance is a focus for them. I want that to go out in the community, but that's not necessarily the purpose of that team. The purpose of that team is to serve as an advisory to me. But when there are people on that committee that aren't knowledgeable about the data or not knowledgeable about our school and our populations, it's hard to give us advice. So it's just hard. So I rely mostly on the teachers that are on that committee to serve as like touchstones for me on, what are you hearing among your colleagues? What are the things that I'm presenting about our goals that you are still confused about? Is there clarity in what our mission and vision is and how your actions support that mission and vision? That is what is most beneficial to me. This year, I have yet to find teacher or a parent, community member, or business person to support me. Last year, I had PTO kind of take that on and just give me whoever they could find. And so at some point, I'm gonna have to turn that over to them and say, hey, I need somebody to sit in. And the teachers that sit on that committee, it really doesn't matter to me because I do want varied expertise, varied knowledge levels. I want it to be a very diverse group. That's not true for all of the communities that we have. Like for Guiding Coalition, I want it to be a strong core of teachers that believe in the PLC process. I want it to be teachers that have some positional power. I want it to be teachers who are influential. But for CIP, it doesn't have to be that. I kind of want to hear from the teachers that sometimes sit back and don't have a whole lot of it, or don't outwardly have a lot of input to give, or are hearing things that won't ever make it to my office, So I don't know. I mean, and I think that's something I'm learning as I go to, like, what is the perfect balance for that committee? But right now it's 4 classroom teachers from all the way from kinder up to 5th. And we've got Kinsey, so librarian, AP, what else is in there? I don't think we have a special. Were you in there? No, you weren't in there. I don't think we have a specialist this year.
Oh, no, Miss Ray.
That's right.
Yes.
So it's very.
So I know we've talked about how you get the goals out to teachers and everything like that. how do you get goals out to parents or to community members? Do they want to know, need to know?
So, yeah, I think that they do, but it depends. Like, our SPED goal isn't going to impact every single family and every single parent.
Right.
And so it's not a secret, but that's something that I rely on the campus improvement team to kind of push out that, hey, this is a focus of the campus. But I also, when I attend PTO meetings, that is something that I share. So the number one thing I shared with them was our goal around attendance, because that directly impacts every single family, every single student. And so I wanted to have that public forum to just say, this is a big focus and here's what we're going to do to address it, so that I'm very upfront about the why. And so when we're cracking down on habitual offenders or the chronic absences, this is why. It's not a surprise to anybody. But something like a SPED goal, while I think it's very beneficial for parents to know that we're targeting that subpop, they are not necessarily going to be able to impact that goal. That goal is going to be impacted by instruction and intervention.
Right.
So it just really depends on, it's not a secret, but I'm not going to publicize that goal like I'm going to publicize the attendance goal.
No, that makes sense. No, that makes absolute sense. Whichever ones they have the most impact on, absolutely. What events are available to help reach those goals? So how do we have events where parents can help to reach the attendance goal or community members?
Yeah, we don't really. When I started here in 2018, we had done away with like our literacy nights and all of the parent information nights, and we really just had coffee with the principal, where parents could come in and just kind of, and we were much smaller then, where they could just openly speak about their concerns and questions, things like that. We did away with the parent nights because the benefits were not outweighing the production of the event.
Okay.
And so our specialists and our teachers were dedicating so much time and so much energy to producing an event like that. And the turnout was pretty low. And that's one of the challenges in our community, is that our parents are very well educated. They have the means to support their students if they're struggling or they need to be extended or pushed, and they seek them out without us. That doesn't mean that there's not a need, but we weren't seeing the payoff that we were expecting. So that's a really great question, because I think, for SPED, we really rely on our student support team or our student support department to provide opportunities for parents through the just community-based events. Attendance, the way that we're doing that, it's not really an event, but we're highlighting the ways that we're celebrating kids for being in school. And then the literacy instruction, I just had a conversation with Carrie Ray this morning about, once we're solid on our phonics instruction, now what can parents do to help support at home? Whether that's at night or we're doing it through the resources that teachers are sending home, I don't know yet, but it's a really, really good question.
Okay, so thinking about TIA this year, so teacher incentive allotment, this is a data collection year. So how do T-TESS goals align with PLC to make sure that we're on the right track for TIA? All these acronyms.
They're all interconnected. So with the teacher, they all have a set of student growth goals. So they have their professional goal, which we know is coaching. That coaching is going to impact their instruction, which ultimately should impact the growth of kids. But then they also have that growth goal. So when we're looking at their T-TESS goals, and anytime we're in their classroom, like when we go in for walkthroughs, we pull up the teachers' goals so that we can give them feedback on, or considerations for the teachers to think about, how did the practices we observed, or the questions that we're challenging them to think about, push them to connect back to those goals. So those are always at the forefront of their mind. But then back to the student growth goal, that growth goal, if they're meeting what they say they're on track to meet, ultimately it should connect back to their formal observation. And so we've got that whole formula where we break down if they're a proficient teacher, that's considered a 3. And based on the scaled score from growth, 3 is proficient. If we're seeing above expected growth, it should fall between a 4 and a 5. A 4 would be accomplished and 5 would be distinguished. So the way that all lines up, when we're doing walkthroughs and we're looking at student data, we shouldn't see that we have in a formal observation a teacher who's scoring in the distinguished or accomplished areas, but when we're looking at their data, students are scoring below what we're expecting for the level of growth. You can't have both.
That's discrepancies.
And at the very beginning of the year, when we had our admin rally, one of the things they showed us was a campus by campus spreadsheet of where we fell and how our teachers' formal observations correlated to student growth. And we had campuses on opposite ends of the spectrum. Like people were either scoring teachers super high, like 4s and 5s, or scoring them very, very low. We ended up being right in the middle, which was really encouraging, because what that tells me is the time that we spend at the beginning of the year when we calibrate walkthroughs and we calibrate formal observations, the 3 of us are more on the same page, making sure that we are very accurate, that it can be more comfortable to award a 4 or a 5 or accomplished or distinguished for a teacher that we know is working hard, a teacher we know is a veteran teacher, a teacher we know is well respected and influential on campus. But if we can't just use their reputation, we've got to use the concrete things that we're seeing and hearing and observing in a classroom observation. And so we've had lots of conversations with teachers who are really upset when we give them a developing or a proficient, because they've never been a developing or proficient teacher. But I always go back to that rubric and I tell them, you show me what I missed that you have evidence for. Because in order to be distinguished or accomplished, you have to have everything within it. It's not bits and pieces. It's not that you did it sometimes. It's all or nothing. And then that relates back to, again, their student growth goal and the whole PLC process, that if we are not seeing that level of student growth, I can't identify you as a master teacher. The 2 have to align. So I don't know if that answered your question.
How, just thinking, how does that correlate to teachers who are less than annual? Will none of them be less than annual anymore, or so
they will never be less than annual, not with TIA.
right, with TIA from here on out? Okay, sorry, just thought in my head. Okay, nice. Okay, so we're going to talk about my PASL, which is one of the certifications that you get now, principal certification. Not everyone had to do it. So with my PASL task 1, and it kind of talks about some of the things that you've already talked about. So mine focuses on student performance in 3rd grade math. We know that sometimes that 3rd to 4th grade is a huge jump. So how can we utilize the PLC process to demonstrate that expected or accelerated growth? So thinking about that means and masters, how can we do that for our students?
I mean, I think the first is just giving the teachers the data to see what our current reality is. I mean, I think a lot of times, and I'm guilty of it too, that we say, we're doing well, and we're doing well because we're doing X, Y, Z. We're collaborating, we're coming every week, we're running flex groups. Like, we know our teachers are working super, super hard. But sometimes that doesn't correlate to what we're seeing in performance. And so I think it's just really important that we're being very transparent about the data that we have, and then having those conversations about why aren't we seeing more, or how could we see more, but also celebrating what they're doing. But we have to honor the fact that our teachers are working very hard. We know that they're working hard, but are there things that we could put in place that streamline some of the work they're doing and strengthen the instruction they're delivering? I think one of the things we're not great about is being honest about what teachers are strongest in certain areas and capitalizing on that. Because we're afraid to hurt other people's feelings.
Yeah.
And I mean, the reality is there are going to be stronger teachers in certain areas and there are going to be weaker teachers in other areas. The struggle is if you have a teacher who is, we really don't have anybody that's weak, but we have teachers that fall at kind of the lower end of where their colleagues are performing. And so the challenge there, if we have a teacher who just across the board is pretty average, we have to find out a way to highlight their strengths. And so if we're always relying on teacher A, we know they're the highest performing, their students are demonstrating that. We're always relying on teacher A to show us what they've done in their classroom, to guide the process. It starts to discourage the others who are on that team. So I think we have to be really intentional about finding the strengths of our weakest teachers and knowing that we can only be as strong as our weakest teacher.
Oh, no, absolutely.
So fourth grade last year was a great example of that the team finally said, you know what, we all have to chip in to support this one teacher. The instruction isn't improving and we have to change our whole structure. And that's pretty unique. Like that doesn't happen.
Right.
Yeah. But we do need the teams to get creative about, how do we pull all of us up so that we're all those high performing teachers.
Right.
And it's hard for the high performing teachers to take a breath and slow down and take the time to build up those weaker teachers.
No, I definitely see that. So again, there's 3 PASL tasks that I'm working on. So how do you guarantee the most impactful professional development? Because one is all about professional development. So once you kind of identify what area you want to focus on, it's what professional development you will do for it. So how do you guarantee the most impactful professional developments for our staff without them getting overwhelmed or thinking this is one more thing or okay, now what?
So this is something that I'm struggling with significantly this year because here we are, we're in October, we've been in school for 2 months now, and we really have not been able to dig into PD. We've been covering district updates and security presentations and required test trainings. And we really have not been able to dig into training that's going to impact us towards our goals. There are a couple of reasons for that. The first is what I just mentioned. The second piece to that is, oh my gosh, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, is the structure for the time that we have together. So we move from having an hour and a half after school for PD to now about 35-minute faculty shares. You can only get so much done in 35 minutes, even though we're meeting 2 sessions rather than 1 a month. It's really hard to dig deep with PD. The other piece that we were intentional about this year is we do a lot of, we're just going to stand and deliver PD because of timing. We don't have, in our roles, in your role, we don't have a whole lot of time to sit down and be intentional about how we're going to deliver the PD that we expect our teachers to then deliver as instruction to students. So I'm thinking about even like conversation structures, turn and talks, or when we read an article, how are we breaking up that article and doing like round robin or whatever it is. So how are we modeling for our teachers what we expect them to do in their classroom with students in our own PD? And then alongside that is how are we giving them PD that they feel is beneficial to them? So as I solicited feedback from team leaders last year, one of the things I heard over and over again was some of us who have been here hear the same PD or engage in the same PD sessions every year. It's not that it's bad information, but we know it and we're required to sit through it again. Well, they're 100% right. They shouldn't have to do that. And so we're really late to the game, but that's part of what I want to talk to ILT about next is we asked for feedback from them and they gave us, our teachers gave us some areas that they feel they need to grow. So how within those 35-40-minute faculty shares can we target what we want to target related to our goals? And move away from just the district and
Yeah.
campus updates and allow them some choice. One of the things I was surprised that they gave me as a piece of feedback is that they still really want some sort of make and take. And I mean, I have to listen to that. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that's something we rarely do. And so I have to be really intentional about when we're going to dig into this PD. All of us need to figure out how can we have our teachers walk away with, whether it's a tangible thing or not,
Right.
maybe it's just a structure, like a math talk or a
Yeah.
warm up or something. But how can we make sure that they leave every PD session feeling, one, that the information was pertinent to where they are in their growth cycle, and then two, that they can bring something directly back that they can use with their kids.
I do know that you also did the Google form.
Yeah.
Like potential PDs that we could have or that they were looking to have.
That they're looking to have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. And we've got, all of the feedback about, from the teachers about their coaching. So we would take that into consideration too. We know their topics, and now we've got to consider how are we delivering that information.
It's just a lot to do that.
Yeah.
What goes into it? And then my last one, it's about my third PASL task, which is what impacts do collaborative teams have on the improvement of school culture?
They are school. So overall, I think our school culture has improved a lot in the years that we've been here. But it's also different team by team. So I'm sure you're thinking right now, there are some teams that are really struggling with the culture of their team, and there are others that are flourishing. The problem is our teachers don't work in silos. So yes, they're primarily functioning within their grade level and with their colleagues in their grade level. But they have connections outside of school. They move grade levels. They take whatever they gain from their experience in one grade level to another. And that can impact both ways, positive and negative. So I think there's a direct correlation to the, just the health and the life of a team and how that impacts the overall culture of the campus. There are times, so I'm going to give an example from last year with one of our teams where we had the opportunity to add another class, and we went to the team and said, hey, we're not so sure that right now is the best time to add another division of a class, and here's why. We have upset parents here, we had teachers out, we had the rezone conversation going on. And the response from the teachers typically is that they will listen and ultimately say, whatever you think is best, we're gonna do, and we're gonna support. And I think that speaks a lot to their level of trust with our leadership team.
Yeah.
But in this case, that was not how they responded. They were very upset, and they outwardly said, we do not feel supported. You're pushing this on us. You're not listening to what we need. And they were angry. Like, I was kind of taken aback by their response. And so I, in that moment, had to make a decision, and ultimately I decided to say, you know what, my number one goal is to support you. I mean, I have to look out for the campus. This isn't going to be a make or break thing. It's going to be challenging for all the reasons I mentioned to the team. But if you feel so strongly that this is what you need in order to feel supported and heard, let's do it. We'll address the concerns along the way, but you got to be prepared for them. But I also couldn't let that statement go that we are not supported. And so while I said, okay, we're gonna make this adjustment and we're gonna go with what you believe is best, I also said to that team, what I won't tolerate is you saying that you're not supported. Not when our leadership team does X, Y, Z. Here are specific examples of how we've gone to bat with you, to the community, to parents, to other colleagues in the district, that you are supported. So this one event may have made you feel in that moment that you weren't supported, but as a whole, you can't quantify and say that overall you are not supported. And so it's just that very tricky balance of giving them some control and some power, but also being very firm on yeah, we're not gonna start that, because that is a culture destroyer.
Yeah.
Like, when you start saying you're not supported, we're not gonna go there.
Oh, yeah.
If you wanna have a conversation about ways that we can do better or things that you would like to see us do differently, fine. But a statement that you're not supported,
Yeah.
we're not gonna throw that out. So,
No, because not only does it drag the team down, but then if they start talking, it drags the rest of the campus down as well. So, yeah. Thank you so much for this.
you're welcome.
I appreciate you. No, I love getting to meet with you.